Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Deep Cut Dive. I got with me here on this Friday, as always, it seems to be, Mr. Martin Popoff. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Absolutely. Doing okay. Thanks for having me again. This is going to be a lot of fun. One of my favorite bands.
There you go, acdc. So a much requested band here on the channel to do a deep cut dive on. And Martin and I a couple weeks ago were like, yeah, we got to add this to our agenda for our weekly sit downs. And we have each put together a list of 5 songs from this pretty enormous catalog. Again, not the big hits, not the stuff they play live all the time, not the tracks that are on there. God, do they even have a greatest hits album? I don't know, but they got a couple live albums, and but I think everybody knows the real popular songs. We're going to try and go a little bit deeper than that, so I'm going to have Martin kick us off with his first choice.
Yeah. Okay. So first choice. One of the big problems with this band, of course, is trying to figure out what everybody's going to accept is actually deep or not. Right.
That's exactly.
Because they've sold hundreds of millions of records, I believe. You know, they got a double diamond and a 7 times platinum, 4 times, etc. So what I did, little show and tell. First of all, I skipped this record. I'm going to show you all the Australian releases here. So
cool.
It gets a little confusing at the beginning, right? So there's your first 3 Australian issues.
That's cool. There's probably a lot of people who have not seen those.
Yeah, and here's our North American issues. Yep. So I zoomed right past those because I went through them and thought, maybe I'm finding the deep cuts on there a little thin, and they're probably my least favorite AC/DC albums, except for some of the later ones. And I also skipped this one, but I almost went with something from this one, Let There Be Rock. Of course, this is the first AC/DC album I ever bought on vacation with the family in Winnipeg. So I went with this record, What's Next to the Moon from Powerage. Mine is your red vinyl version that we got here in Canada, right? So what's Next to the Moon? I mean, I've often called this my favorite AC/DC album of all time, but literally this morning, I think I've changed my mind. It probably is Highway to Hell, but it's certainly those two are really, really close. What's Next to the Moon? Are we going to accept that as a deep cut? I don't know. I mean, I almost went with Gone Shootin', Up to My Neck and You. The big songs are Rock and Roll Damnation, Sin City, Riffraff, right? So basically, I love this song because it's one of these that starts slow and the beat is kind of like a little tom-tom beat and the guitar is really polite. And it's a cool little bluesy riff, but then it picks up and then eventually the beat comes in and they just kind of heavy it up a little. And it's just one of those magic AC/DC moments where, Bon Scott does the double tracking vocal with himself, All Right, Officer, I Confess, and all that part of the song. So yeah, just a really cool build to this song. It's a little bit of I think it's a bit of a little longer one. But it feels long because it does have that slow build to, the payoff that AC/DC does. And they do these slow build songs, right? For those about to rock. What the heck is that song called? The first one on Razor's Edge. My mind's drawing a blank. But Thunderstruck, yeah. So they do these songs where it takes a while to get going, right? And this is one of those. Just a really charming song on kind of a bluesy, charming, let your hair down album. Love Powerage. So I felt I had to give props to something from, what was previously to this morning my favorite AC/DC album.
There you go. That's a good choice. Really good choice. So one of the things I love about having you on the show, Martin, is that you and I often tend to go in a little bit different directions on some of these. And that's really good for the viewer because they get a good wide spectrum of coverage. And so I decided to go pull something from High Voltage. And my choice here is Rock and Roll Singer, which I think is it should have been called Rock and Roll Guitar Player because it's called Rock and Roll Singer, but yet there's no vocals for like the first minute of the song, right? Basically all these kind of cool crisp riffs from Malcolm and stingy bluesy guitar solos. It's like, I went and revisited this the other day and I'm like, yeah, it's like cool. And I'm waiting for the chorus to come into the verse. I'm like, still waiting. It's like I forgot how long that kind of intro was onto that. And the song is only, 3.5 minutes long. But I think it's just a really cool catchy sing-along song once they get past all the kind of guitar histrionics in the beginning. And it's, again, as always with this band, the groove is just absolutely locked in. I mean, you know, AC/DC is one of those bands, and I know they're one of your favorites, and I've always loved them. They've never been one of my top-tier bands, but when I'm in the mood to hear them, man, am I in the mood to hear them, and I really love them. They're just a really fun band, no matter what era you're talking about. So, and yeah, you're right. There's a bunch of tunes on here that, you know, Long Way to the Top, TNT, this stuff you really couldn't pick from this album. But I wanted to pick one, and that seemed to be like an obvious choice. So, rock and roll singer.
Yeah. Cool.
Or rock and roll guitar player, as I like to call it.
Yeah. A note about that album. I mean, I had to remind myself, I kind of know what, you know, what's gold and what's platinum and all that with this catalog. But it amazed me that High Voltage is 3 times platinum. Dirty Deeds is 6 times platinum. And then Let There Be Rocket drops down to double platinum. Power Age only went platinum. And then, you know, the Dam burst. Well, the Dam burst with Back in Black, and then it burst backwards to Highway to Hell. Yeah. And then everything was pretty big after that, you know. But although even, you know, in the later years, they have the odd single platinum. I got quite a few single platinum, some doubles. You know, they had their second win with Razor's Edge. That went, what did it go here? 5 times platinum, Razor's Edge. So, yeah, they had kind of a big second period, a second wind, right?
Did a lot of the early Bon Scott albums, did those like sell enormously like that right off the bat, or did that really start to rise with the success of Back in Black?
It's definitely Back in Black. I mean, nothing was doing all that great really until so. And then it went back. But I was surprised how massive Dirty Deeds was, and I'm trying to even figure if that's even incorrect, because that's a lot of copies. But actually, no. Now that I think about it, I think what happened there, that's right. The reason that sold so well is it was released in America right after Back in Black, I believe. So right in the middle of the hoopla. And so AC/DC was just the biggest thing in the world and on everybody's mind. And that's why it sold so many copies. That's right. And it actually, you know, annoyed management a little bit, the whole idea, because people were confusing whether it was the new AC/DC album.
Oh, because pre-internet, right? If you really were not that hip to the band and only jumped on board with Back in Black, you all of a sudden heard Dirty Deeds. You're like, wait a second, this sounds kind of different. That's not Brian Johnson. Yeah. I mean, there's a marked difference between those two albums. And I remember as being a kid, I was also kind of confused. I'm like, this is really not kind of the same band. This sounds pretty different. Yeah. And they were marketing it as the brand new AC/DC album.
So that's interesting. I mean, I'm just thinking about this now, but this is literally one of the only times probably where fooling the public worked out famously. Because if that's true, that it went 6 times platinum, you know, we know there's no hope in hell that would have done that, because it's not chock full of hit singles.
Right.
Had it not been issued right then. So I think that's probably what happened there. But yeah, that's massive sales. Right?
6 times platinum is a shitload of records, man.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so my number 2, right? We're ready for number 2. So basically from this bad boy here, Highway to Hell, this I guess is my favorite AC/DC album. I can't deny it. I mean, everything is just great on here. And I guess on Power Age, there's a few that fall down a little bit. It's a little bit almost too casual, but this is just a perfect album start to finish. So the big songs are Highway to Hell, Probably Girls Got Rhythm, Shot Down in Flames, Beating Around the Bush, maybe, Night Prowler, maybe, right? But my favorite AC/DC song of all time is going to be my second pick, Touch Too Much, from this album. I just love how it's so heavy, and it's got a lot of bottom end, and it just stomps along. It's very different for the band. It has a lot of chord changes, a lot of melody changes in it. It's really melodic, but even the moment I heard it as a kid, you know, I thought it was probably the heaviest song in the album. Basically that one, Walk All Over You, and Beating Around the Bush were the 3 we considered the ones for the headbangers. I'm not sure why, because, you know, you listen back to this song and it really has kind of like a sympathetic, soft melody to it, but it's just so heavy. It's almost Sabbathy in a way. It's almost like a really melodic Sabbath song. So I had to pick it because it is my favorite AC/DC song of all time, and I think it does qualify as a deep cut. So Touch Too Much.
I agree with you. That is the best song on that album. It's also a top 10 AC/DC song for me. I love it. Cool. I've always thought it's great. And for me, that song became the blueprint for what Mutt Lange did with Def Leppard. I
Good
hear
point.
so much of those albums in that song.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say the blueprint of what he did on Back in Black, because that I can also see. I can also see just sort of a sober structure to it that leads on to Back in Black, which you don't get as much on the other songs on Highway to Hell.
Yeah, exactly. Cool stuff. I didn't choose it for this episode. I think probably because it was in my ACDC top 10 song show, and I tried to steer clear of some of the ones I picked on there. But so I did go to Let There Be Rock, okay, from 1977, and I went with a fantastic song, which don't think they played much live, and it's definitely one of the deeper tracks on here. A song called Overdose. I mean, one of the heavier songs they ever did.
I almost went with it. It's incredible.
It's one of those songs that the more you go back to it, the better it gets, and it's one of their heavier songs, I think.
Yeah.
It's got some absolutely killer riffs from Malcolm, and Angus is just like shredding on the whole back end of this song. I mean, and you got Bon Scott, who literally, for my money, really came into his own as a true rock star with this album, and I think he's just oozing machismo and everything that's Bon Scott in this particular song, and I just love it. And I wanted to pull something from this album. And there were a couple others I was looking at, and then I'm like, it's got to be Overdose. It's got to be Overdose. Should have been. That to me is a song that should have been a concert staple for them for decades. And it's funny when you go back and do these type of shows, and you look at some of these great songs that never really got the attention from the band or from the fans. It's like, why weren't they? Because these are dynamite composition. So Overdose, that's my
very cool. Yeah, that album to me, it's a little bit of my Deep Purple in Rock and Black Sabbath Volume 4 in that it's a little bit old and almost too heavy in a certain way. Like it's somehow it doesn't get my mood up the way Power Age and Highway to Hell does, that album. So and I want to mention I'm a faithful watcher of your shows. Sean Minier reminded me to go back to the Backtrack stuff and look at that, and he picked out a couple there that I didn't think I liked very much, but I almost went with Cold Hearted Woman, which is kind of this era, I believe. It's this era, Power Age era. And so AC/DC actually has some non-LP rarities, which is kind of cool. But most of them, I went through it to prepare for this show, and I really didn't find anything that I was going to put up. But Cold Hearted Man. Did I say woman? I think it's Cold Hearted Man. Yeah, is probably the best one of sort of that rarity era there. But that's a great choice and such a heavy album. And there were 2 or 3 I could have picked from there as well. So yeah.
And, cool. And it's interesting you mentioned Deep Purple in Rock and Volume 4, which ironically are my 2 favorite albums from both of them.
Okay. Exactly. Okay, cool. All right, so my third choice, I went with from this record, Flick of the Switch. There's the back, there's the track list. I went with This House is on Fire, and I hope that qualifies as a deep track because it's early in the track list, right? Second song, I believe. But I almost went with Bedlam in Belgium, Deep in the Hole. I guess the hits on this record were Guns for Hire was a single, Flick of the Switch was a single, Nervous Shakedown. Main live ones, I even looked that up. That was kind of Flick of the Switch and Guns for Hire, which frankly are my 2 favorite songs on the album. So I'm not contrarian at all when it comes to this record. But I love This House is on Fire. It's got one of those kind of bluesy riffs that they do, kind of smeary bluesy. I mean, do you call that chromatic? I don't know my guitar talk, but it's got that, and then it goes into this big stomping anthemic chorus, and it's just one of the anthems on this album. I wanted to pick something from this album just to represent the fact that this is my favorite album of the entire Brian Johnson era for them. It's really heavy start to finish. It's raw, but it's not like, I mean, the narrative on this album is a lot of people say it's too raw, but I don't think it's too raw at all. I think it's got, good solid production values, but it is definitely, not as soft and analog as the previous 2, right? But yeah, so there's so many great songs on this album, and I just find it a real partying, drinking hard sort of album. And full of great heavy songs. Obviously, it was a step down. I believe it only went platinum, perhaps. Yeah, platinum after after four times platinum for
those, yeah.
Yeah, for those about to rock. So it was a step down. But yeah, good solid songs. Is it a deep track? I'm not so sure. But there's my pick.
Well, we were on the same wavelength because I almost went with that song. That was my initial thought, and then I changed it to Bedlam in Belgium, which is another terrific song. And I absolutely agree with you. I think this is one of the most underrated albums in their entire catalog. Yeah. And I think it's heavy. And, you know, I guess this was, what was the year? What was this, 83, I think, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, were they going to be able to sustain the success of those two albums that came before it, and really three when you think about it? I don't know. You know, a lot of people complain that it didn't sound great. Like people were like, oh, missing the Mutt Lange touch and what have you. I don't know. I mean, I like the rawness of this album, and I think it's just really heavy. It's less kind of squeaky clean, and there's a ton of great tracks on here. I think I've been listening to this album over the last couple of years, probably more than any other AC/DC album, and I don't
agree. Yeah.
I don't get the hate for this album. I don't understand it at all. I think people need to go back and revisit this. But back to Bedlam in Belgium, it's just a great old school AC/DC style rocker. Great chorus, great backing vocals are huge. The groove is absolutely locked in. The riffing is just terrific. I don't know. It's like trademark blueprint quality AC/DC. You know, every now and then you hear people talking about specific albums that are, you know, kind of shit on for various reasons. And I just don't understand when, like, you know the album and you've loved it and you hear all this criticism and you just don't get it. It's like, I never felt it was warranted when it comes to this album. Was it Back in Black? No. But you know what? It's a compelling album nonetheless. I think it stands on its own, and it's really, over time, I think, gotten even better. So you and I are absolutely on the same page with this album. Yeah. I steer people towards this one all the time when they only maybe know a couple of their bigger releases. I love it.
Yeah, it's actually, it would be my third favorite AC/DC album of all time. I consider it their Black Sabbath Born Again in a way, right? They're both 1983. They're both these heavy odd man out, you know, that get, like you say, crapped on a lot for whatever reason, you know. The album cover is really odd too. I mean, you can't picture it ever again without that album cover. But what a strange album cover!
Yeah,
right?
That didn't do it any justice. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, their album covers are terrible, right? I've often made the point that Def Leppard, AC/DC.
I was waiting for you to say it first. Yeah, I agree with
you. And Foreigner. Those three bands have the worst album covers of all bands, right?
Yeah.
So my next choice, I went with this album, Fly on the Wall, with Back in Business, which is second to last track on the album. So this is one that I was very disappointed when this record came out. But I've grown to like it and play it a lot more. It's a really nasty album. I mean, the production is really rough on it. The drums are kind of really like dry and distorted. And Brian Johnson is really, you know, he sounds like he's losing his voice on this record. But this is probably the heaviest song on the album. It's got one of those really cool riffs to it. Again, a really anthemic chorus. There were other things I could have gone with on this album: Hell or High Water, Playing with Girls, Send for the Man, even. It's a little bit like Deep Purple Abandoned for me, where a lot of the great songs are later in the album, which is kind of cool. But actually, probably my favorite though is Shake Your Foundations, I would say, which is the second song on the album, right? And kind of a bigger song. Danger, I definitely didn't like, but yeah. So this is to me, this is almost like their Motley Crue album, right? It's just really kind of nasty and a little bit mean, like Motley, right? But I've grown to like it a little more over the years. So there's a good deep track to go look for, way at the other end of the record.
Yeah, it's a solid album, I think, and another one of those albums I think gets ignored by a lot of people. And I almost went for a song on that one, and I ultimately decided to go to The Razor's Edge instead. It was I wanted to pick one from one of these two, and I went with the title track on here, which has one of Brian's, like, you know, you mentioned nasty. I mean, he's just like shredding his voice on glass in that song.
Yeah,
and it's slow, it's dark, it's heavy. It's got lots of guitar solos from Angus. They played that song a lot live on that tour, and it was featured on that live album, but then basically retired from the set list. And I think this is, you know, I mean, everybody talks about Thunderstruck and Money Talks, right, which were the big songs on here. But I always kind of dug that title track quite a bit, and I don't know. That was my choice here. I it was between that or a song from the album you just mentioned, and I was like, yeah, I decided to go with this one.
Yeah, perfect choice. Yeah, and the album we skipped in there, "Blow Up Your Video," is that album is one of my definitely least favorites.
Yep.
Don't like the production at all. There's some interesting ideas on it. I'm sure we could have found a deep track because they're pretty much all deep on that record, right? Although that record went platinum too, I believe. So it's hard to believe. What a stupid title though, eh? And dumb cover and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I just.
This was their biggest seller in like a while, right? Wasn't this? Yeah.
Yeah, massive. That went 5 times plat. So that's their biggest seller since. In fact, that even eclipses.
For Those About to Rock, right?
Rock, yeah. So biggest seller since Back in Black, and that's just the end of the hair metal era there, right? And this is one of their possibly one of their Go to Vancouver and Try Harder albums, as I did an episode on my History in 5 Songs thing about that. So this might have been one of those where they went and recorded in Vancouver maybe for the first time. I don't know, something like that. But you can tell they put a lot more effort into Razor's Edge than they put into Blow Up Your Video. Not enough effort to add an apostrophe in Razors.
Right.
Which is very annoying. But otherwise,
I'm just looking at it now. I'm like, yeah, I never noticed that before.
Okay, so my last choice is from Black Ice, and I went with Wheels from this album. I mean, this record, I wanted to pay tribute to this record because it is my favorite of all of the later ones. You and I have talked before, Pete, like I really do not like Rock or Bust, unfortunately, and that really makes me sad. And I find a lot to enjoy about Stiff Upper Lip and Ball Breaker, but they're so soft in the production, it almost disqualified anything from those for me. This record, the production's a little more vibrant, but again, this is almost like that Deep Purple Abandoned situation where there's a lot of great tracks later in the album. It's a really long album. I guess the big ones are Rock and Roll Train, Big Jack, Anything Goes, Money Made. But I almost went with Spoiling for a Fight and Decibel. So yeah, a lot of great songs on this record. Wheels is just one of these that's kind of more up tempo, and it's got that kind of Stonesy thing that you like to hear from AC/DC every once in a while.
Yep. Well, I went to the same album.
Cool.
And I had 2 choices. You mentioned them both, Spoiling for a Fight and Decibel. I decided to go with Spoiling for a Fight. Yeah, a lot of choices on this album. And I like the production by Brendan O'Brien on this album. I think it's pretty cool. It's pretty crisp. I like your mention of the Rolling Stones because I think they kind of dialed that in a little bit on this album. Obviously it's a little bit heavier than the Stones. But I like this song. It's got that real tight Phil Rudd cymbal stuff going on there. The riffs are great. The chorus is very memorable. It's just another... This is one of those albums, I think when it first came out, I don't know if I really appreciated it as much as I have later on. The more I listen to this album over the years, I'm like, you know what, this is actually a really solid record. And I think the whole album just sounds like classic AC/DC. And that's really what you want. And like I said, I almost went with Decibel, which I think is another kick-ass song from this album. But,
15 songs, man.
That's a lot, right?
I remember when this came out, that this really caused that big debate about albums being too long, which is a weird thing to complain about. And you can understand it on one end, or on another. It's like, I basically remember saying, it's AC/DC. They only make a record every 5, 6, 7 years.
So
give us all the songs. Yeah. Do not give us 10 songs and then go away for another whole bunch of years, which is
exactly, yep.
So
if I remember correctly, this was the #1 picked album of the year on Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles that year, if I remember.
Oh, okay. All right.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I think it went, I don't have it in my notes, but I think it went platinum, and then Rock or Bust only went gold. So at least they didn't have something that didn't certify, because there are a lot of bands that have that at the end, right? Kiss, Van Halen. There's a lot of bands that have, even Rush actually, have records that did not certify at all. And AC/DC, made it all the way to the end and certified. And unfortunately, it's only gold, but still.
And that's got to be hard to do these days. I mean, what is to be certified? What are the numbers now? It's not like it used to be. You know, gold was 500,000 here in the States and 1 million plus for platinum back in the day. I mean, what is it now? If you sell 10,000 copies, it's gold. I don't even know.
More so, I'm confused, and in fact, I think the industry is actually still totally confused, because there was a time there when they okay, number one, I don't know if they actually officially lowered the American numbers. They certainly did in Canada. It got knocked back from 50s and 100s to like 80s and 40s. But they might have done that in the States. But there was a period there where they were trying to figure out how to count downloads, and then
streaming
plays to make an album, and then streaming. So streaming has caused an even greater problem. And apparently there's kind of like a mystical formula that nobody really understands to figure out how they're doing it now. So, but yeah, of course, physical sales are just a dribble of the whole thing now. But back when Rock or Bust came out, you know, it was still a little more stable. What year is this thing? 2014. So it's 6 years ago, right? So we would have been heavy in the download era, and probably not so heavy in the streaming era at that point, right?
Interestingly enough, Black Ice, we were just talking about how long of an album it is, and Rock or Bust is like way short.
I know, like I hate it. I mean, it's 11 songs, and I played this again to listen for something. Number one, the production annoys me, but I just basically, you know, all of these songs, other than Play Ball, the lead single was really good. And then I was so disappointed with the rest of it. I was really ticked off. I wanted to love it, of course, because literally, you know, this band's one of my top 3 favorite bands.
Yeah. So. I dug it a lot when it came out, and I saw them on that tour, and they were fantastic. I haven't gone back to that album since, though, and that's now what, like 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
It's like, oof. But,
I saw a really bizarre AC/DC gig. You know, talking about seeing these guys. You know, they came through about 4 years ago and played an outdoor place. Actually, it was the same place. So the big one that I saw was the big SARS-Stock concert, Toronto Rocks, where it was AC/DC and Stones closed it, and Rush was on the bill and all that. 400,000 people, right?
Wow.
Back at the last virus, you know, this concert put on to help Toronto, which was kind of hit a little harder with SARS than anywhere else. Anyways. So that was amazing. That was that show where, you know, I wrote it up this way, and I swear I think it's probably gone into the public consciousness, partially because of the cover story we did on Brave Words, where I said AC/DC, you know, stole the show or whatever from the Stones. And part of that is that trick bands would do, where you would want to go on as the sun goes down. So you go on and it's light out, and then the sun goes down. That's exactly what happened with AC/DC. I believe they opened with Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be.
Oh, wow, cool.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I got to interview Malcolm in the hotel the next day, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's where I got these things signed, right? But so this other concert that I saw with them, they went back to Downsview. They played Downsview again, but it was only, which is just like a big open military park northwest of the city, just a big empty park. The Pope was there also with hundreds of thousands of people, right? But so AC/DC put on the show just with a backup band, and they, you know, I've heard rumors of up to 70,000 people going to that show. But I've also heard at the low end 40,000, and we were, you know, way far away and stuff. But yeah, just another cool, out of the blue, set up in the middle of nowhere outdoor show. So and that, you know, that might have been Rock or Bust. Had already been out at that point, but
yeah, I saw them at Rock or Bust tour, Giant Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. So football stadium. So there was 50, 60, 70,000 people there, maybe more. I don't know. And that was an event, right? You don't see too many bands that big. In fact, I think the only 2 bands I've seen in that big of a kind of atmosphere in the last decade or 2 is the Stones and AC/DC. Because, you know, how many of these bands can sell out 50,000 seat plus, you know, stadiums anymore?
Yeah, we got a place here called Rogers Center, right, where the Jays play out of, and it's too big for most concerts. It's like it's got the retractable roof, right? So our main one is just like the hockey arena with 17, 18,000. That's where everybody goes, right? But this place will hold 55, and Metallica played there, Guns N' Roses played there recently, and some of the, you know, the big pop bands have gone there. But literally, I think in Toronto that place is used for a concert maybe once every 18 months. Recently, you know, not very often. So yeah, but ACDC, yeah, it's, you know, I think a lot of people, their big memories are that I've seen them outside, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of outside, you're going to go see Metallica at your local drive-in theater?
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. That's
$115 a carload.
the last time I saw them was in a club, a small club of 800 people. They played the Opera House here when they were launching that new album. So it's just a small, tight, packed bar. And you know, they came into town for press, and I interviewed Kirk the next day. But that yeah. So that previous night they played a place that holds. What does it hold actually? It's more than eight. It holds about 1,000, I think. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, I don't know. These social distancing concerts, I don't know, it looks pretty weird, because, you know, as when you see the pictures of them, you're necessarily going to be sent way farther and farther and farther back, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, you know, I don't know how big some of these screens are, but if you're not up front, and you know, I personally never even like going to see movies in drive-throughs, drive-ins, because I mean the feel of being there is cool, but you're sitting in your car, you don't have a really good view of the screen, and it's just kind of like the sound is not good. So, but you know, people are starving to get out and go see music, and I get it. But yeah, my mother sent me she took a picture of a clip in the newspaper, and she's like, "Oh, you're going to go to this?" And I'm like, $115 a carload. It's like, I don't like Metallica that much anymore to go spending that kind of money on that. That's all right. I'll spend it on something else. Yeah. So anyway, there we have it. A little ACDC deep cut dive for everybody today. So for all you ACDC fans, in the comments below, list your 5 or 10 choices of deep cuts throughout their catalog for those who maybe aren't that big on ACDC or only really know the really popular songs. This show is for those folks to go ahead and discover some more of their music. I got my dog she's trying to give me her selection for the background. There we go. Did you hear that?
Hey,
she's like, you guys didn't pick anything from Rock or Bust. I hate you both.
Right, yeah.
So for Martin Popoff, I am Pete Pardo. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Martin is coming back on Monday. We've got a cool little rant for you Monday morning, so stay tuned for that. I'm not going to divulge any more because I think we probably are both going to be working on our discussion points for Monday. So we'll see you all then. Have a good one and enjoy your weekend. Martin, take care.
Okay.